I love to bring back history and tell people you can't expect me to trust what you're saying when history of my 41 years has shown me something different. And in my 41 years of being a Black woman, it has shown me that I can't really trust what society is telling me. I have to lean in on my community.
Welcome to the ZAMI NOBLA National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. Our conversation today is with Jennifer Horn, ZAMI NOBLA's board chair. We had a wonderful conversation about her work in social work, her leadership with ZAMI NOBLA, the ways in which how we think about aging determines the way in which we live, move, and have our being on this planet, and what she hopes to leave as a leader in the field of aging. We know the term Black don't crack, and that may be true. But certainly when we look at the harsh light that white supremacy bears down on the lives of Black people, it's important to think about all the different ways that our bodies endure the dehumanization and the oppression of racism, heterosexism, homophobia, classism, ageism, all the things that bear heavy on the body. We're talking about that today with Jennifer Horn. Listen in.
My name is Jennifer Mary Florence Horn. I am 41 years old, and I am showing up in the world by being intentional in spaces and letting people see what it looks like to do things in practice versus like in theory. Definitely outside of the status quo, definitely leading from lived experience and leaning on the wisdom of others. I find it very important to show people what it looks like to implement new practices as a professional and in my own personal life. Because I just think that human-centeredness and that human connection is really important, more so than all of the accolades that come along with your professional degrees. So that's how I show up, in showing you what it looks like in practice versus what it says on paper and in theory. Because I think that's really important.
Well, thank you for being with us today. And I am especially excited about the way you show up as ZAMI NOBLA's board chair and the leadership you are providing to the organization. It's really quite exciting to see you work, move, and have your being in the world of aging and bringing all those skills to the organization. So thank you for that.
Another tidbit is Mary. My middle name is two middle names, Mary Florence. Mary's for my great-grandmother, Mary Beulah Horn, on my dad's side, and Florence is for my great-grandmother on my mom's side.
Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about where you grew up and any childhood formative experiences you had?
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, lived in Denver until I was probably about 11, and then moved to Colorado Springs. And probably I've always been more interested in older adults and connecting with older adults and listening to their stories and understanding how they show up in the world and how they navigated spaces. I've never really been interested in people around my age just because I don't feel like I've experienced a lot, I don't really know what advice or wisdom they can offer me if we're going through the same thing at the same time. Whereas with older adults, the filters seem to be removed because you've experienced life. So those surface level conversations aren't as prevalent as like they are with younger people, where older adults, they understand the value of your time. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate how they're honest and they have the conversation. And it's something that I've always felt like as I get older, that's kind of how I want to be presented and how people see me. So I've always been around older adults. My first job was working in a care facility in the kitchen, and then working as like a waitress in the kitchen, and then working my way up to being a resident assistant and a medication manager. And then just finding all of the incredible things that people have done across their lives. And then I guess I just really like a personal thing of like, you tell people to do all of these things across, like in their life, to make the successes, to age well, to live successfully, to die successfully. Like, what does that even look like? What does that mean? But then realizing like all social contracts have slightly been broken, but mainly really the older adult contracts have been broken, right? You tell people that they can work and then they can retire at a certain age, but then you're expanding that retirement age and then you're removing services. So I think for me, it's insulting to see that you have these people working and paying into systems and then throwing them to the side. So that's where I heavily show up with the aging population, just because one, I am aging and I don't want to experience that when I'm in my 80s. And I've been in the field of aging for over 20 years and I haven't really seen what it means to age gracefully or age in place successfully.
Growing up in Colorado, how did you come to understand your sexual orientation?
Interesting. Because I have two cousins. My cousin, both of them, one is a lesbian, one is a gay man. And it's my mom's brother, his two kids. And so it's interesting because I remember vividly talking with my female cousin about having a crush on a girl and how I knew that crush was different than boys because I never really felt the intimacy piece, I guess you could say, with males. For me, I guess it would be more of a performative, like, carnal response, I guess you could say, of like, let's just do this and get it done. Whereas with women, there's just so much more layers to it in the sense of like, I want to put the energy in. That's where I find more attraction. So I've always known that I've wanted to be with women and desired to be with women. I did come out as bisexual thinking that that would be the easier way in high school, and then realizing like, no, because it just kind of leaves the door open for people to say, well, maybe you haven't found the right man, or maybe you haven't found the right person. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's just, I don't have an interest. Like, I have a lot of male friends and I think that's great and that's fine. But to have a relationship just seems like daunting and dreadful and I'm not interested in it. But for the woman, I'm like, oh yeah, 100%, just because I have that connection and that feeling where it's never felt odd to me. I do remember telling my grandmother, and she was telling me that it was a phase, and I laughed and said, it's not a phase, because if it's a phase, it's been a phase since the day I popped out of the womb, right? Like, I'm pretty certain I knew the moment I could realize that you could have attraction to somebody, I knew I had attraction to women. And my cousins, I think we lucked out, thankfully, that we were in a family where that being your sexual orientation wasn't such a big issue. Although I didn't come out to my mom, I dropped a lot of hints. I joined a lot of groups, a lot of clubs, and my mom called me out and said, you know, I love you even if you are a closeted lesbian, and then hung up the phone, and I was panicked and thought, oh no,
Oh my
what do you
gosh.
mean? What do you
Were
mean?
you in high
Right?
school
And
or
so
were you in college then? What were you?
I was just out of high school, and I actually was my first year in college at Pikes Peak Community College, which is now Pikes Peak State College. And that was right when Club Q in 2003 opened. And so that was the space that I was going to quite a lot with people, for a lot of our LGBTQ meetups for the school. And I would just tell my mom, hey, I'm going to this LGBTQ group. And she would just kind of say, okay. And then one day she was at work and decided to call me. And I didn't know what to do. And I called her back and I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, you've been dropping a lot of hints. So I'm assuming that you're a lesbian. And I said, I am. Are you okay with that? And she said, it doesn't change anything, right? So I appreciated that. And then sidebar, like my grandmother just turned 96 in March. And probably 2 years ago, we talk often, but 2 years ago, I remember we were on the phone and she had said, Jennifer, I don't know, something on the news talking about this virus or this sickness going on, this LGB something. And I said, oh, grandma. I said, it's not a virus. I said, LGBTQ is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning. I said, you do realize that your granddaughter, me, is lesbian. And she said, well, now hold on now, Jennifer. She said, I didn't know that. I said, I'm pretty sure I told you. And she said, it doesn't change anything. You're still my granddaughter and I still love you. And so I've always held on to that thinking, if a 94-year-old woman can accept her granddaughter for who she is, regardless who she loves, then there's lots of room for people to change and accept their loved ones for seeing them as human beings rather than what we do behind closed doors or who we're intimate with. It's like, as long as someone is healthy, happy, and loving and it's consent, right? Then you should be happy for that person. So I find comfort in that. Although they do bother me a lot about, are you finding a spouse? Are you going to date anybody? And it's like, currently I'm not interested. I'm happy with what I'm doing. If it falls into my lap, maybe I'll entertain it, but it's not like something that's on my radar. And I don't think it's ever been on my radar since I was a kid. I never wanted to get married and I never wanted to have children. I just knew that I always wanted to work with older adults and have my own little commune of old people living together in our tiny houses and our caregivers being in there, and we just self-sustain ourselves. That's my goal. It's been my goal since I was 16, and it will still be my goal.
You know, a lot of people who talk about their being in relationship with older people at a young age typically are folks I've discovered who are either single children or they're the youngest and there's a span between them and their other siblings. Are you in that category?
I have an older sister. She's 4 years older than me. And then my mom got remarried when I was she got common law marriage when I was about 11 or 12. And I have a younger sibling that's 12 years younger than me.
Okay.
But I did live a large portion of my life as the baby of the family.
Ah, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It does bring about a certain sensibility, I think, when I meet younger people who have always been around older people and feel comfortable in that space. They have a different appreciation for the
Hmm.
lifespan that we have as human beings on this planet.
Yes.
I know you're a very busy woman. You're doing a lot. You're a student. You're a teacher. I mean, all these different things that you're doing, a workshop facilitator. You're just a very busy woman. How did you get to this place where aging was something that you knew you needed to take on professionally and in terms of leadership with nonprofit organizations?
Um, I think I've always wanted to work with older adults. That's always been my population focus. I just didn't know how to do it. And then I joined the Navy when I was 24. Just cause, in your 20s, you really don't know what you're doing with your life. And it's kind of like, I got to figure it out. And that was my out, was joining the military. In the military, it's very high school and college life, but I appreciated that there were those that were a little bit older that would have the honest conversations about, like, you need to figure out what you need to do, take advantage of the tuition assistance, go to school while you're active duty, get your credits done. And so I did lean in on a lot of that. And I initially was going in for nursing, and I thought psychiatric nursing mainly with older adults, because I'm a firm believer that the baby boomer population and those that are still but still are living from the silent generation, like, have a lot of trauma, a lot of unhealed wounds, that if they just had the opportunity to sit in space with someone who's not there to fix or judge or find solutions, that maybe they can start learning to heal a lot of the patterns and behaviors that they've learned. And I think that's what pushed me into more of like the mental health and behavioral health aspect of older adults. Initially, I was going to go for geropsychology. But the VA at that time for the voc rehab said that they don't pay for doctorate degrees. So I went for my master's of social work. And social work wasn't really my field either, but then I realized I can work with older adults as a social worker. And I remember in my class, they asked, in 3 words, what's your population or what's your goal? And I said, old, happy gays. Like, that's what I want to work with. That's what I want to do. I just really have this feeling of like, you shouldn't be in your 80s and your 90s still trying to hide who you truly are, especially if you have to go into a care facility. And I think that's what really stressed it, is like, I was probably 20 when I was working at the facility on the floor, and I had another coworker who was transgender, and she disclosed that to us, the employees, and one resident, because that one resident disclosed to us that she was a lesbian. And once we found that out, she hung out with us quite often when we were at work, and I appreciated being around her and I appreciated having that time, but I felt horrible that if we weren't there, she stayed in her room and then doesn't get to talk about her life or the people that she's been involved with or the people that she's fallen in love with or had her heart broken with, because society doesn't allow us to have those conversations because they want to ignore that we exist. And so I think that really pushed me to show for myself, like, I am a lesbian woman who is aging, and I don't have children and I don't have a spouse. So most certainly I'll probably end up in a care facility. But do I want to be in a care facility and have to go back in the closet?
Well, and what's so interesting about ZAMI NOBLA and what we're doing and organizations like ours is really helping people rethink what aging is and the possibilities of community at the long end of the spectrum, where we may be able to do co-housing and be able to
Hmm.
provide for opportunities to be together and have better outcomes. Can you speak about how you have seen things change from the time you were, 24 and looking at this area and thinking about aging and the golden edge of it for you personally, and then now being in research and doing this work and seeing some of those shifts, the better shifts or the worse shifts? What have you seen in the time of the years that you've been doing this work for the outcomes of LGBTQ elders?
What I noticed was a lot of the conversation and research circulated around cisgendered white men, and I didn't know where I fit in that space. And I didn't really know where to go. I thought Sage was like the only aging LGBTQ services, right? Um, and I think I, on a whim, applied for this ASA, American Society on Aging Rise Fellowship that they were starting for BIPOC leaders in aging. And I applied, and but I always say the universe does it for reasons. And the universe had Patrice contact Marianne directly and ask Marianne if she would be willing to be my mentor. And then Marianne became my mentor. And then this door opened, and I realized that there's so many people out there in the Black lesbian world doing all this work. And I just didn't have the opportunity because I didn't have representation. So I think the big push for me in this space is being representation for people that are like me, who didn't realize that we were there. And so I think that's where I'm leaning in this space of like realizing I don't have to stay in the status quo just because it's comfortable for other people. And I lean heavily on like learning my own family history on my dad's side, that a lot of them were advocates in their life. A lot of them were, pioneers, and they spoke up for those that were living in disparity. And I think it's in my bloodline to do that. I think it's in my bloodline to advocate for people who look like me. And then it just happened the way it needed to happen in the timeline that it happened. So, but I do think, because I heavily focus on taking the information and the wisdom from everybody in ZAMI NOBLA and applying it, right? And saying it's not just, someone's story from their 50s or 60s or 70 years old. It's also stories from people from their 20s and 30s and their 40s. It's having those conversations and having the space to have those conversations. So I think that's kind of where I like really leaned into it, was learning and understanding that when I started in this space, I was in the space of comfort for other people, and staying within the status quo. But then when I was able to fully give myself permission, realizing that there is representation out there, then I'm able to heavily lean into what ZAMI NOBLA's mission is and really advocate hard for Black, Asian lesbians.
For those who don't know much about organization, they may not know that Marianne, the Marianne you're referring to, is our founder and executive director, Marianne Adams. And you all have had just a wonderful co-mentoring relationship across the years since you began that process of coming to the organization, and her providing assistance as your mentor with that program. And it really is an example of multi-generational work and advocacy.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we do in ZAMI NOBLA is this real multi-generational span of aging and thinking about aging and reshaping aging. And I think that that's important because oftentimes people have a very limited understanding of what aging is and how they would define it. So as someone who is in her early 40s, and who is the board chair for ZAMI NOBLA, the National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging, why is it important for you, particularly at this age, to offer the leadership you do and have the understanding you do around aging?
I think I don't want ZAMI NOBLA to ever feel like when members begin to transition from life into death, that ZAMI NOBLA's mission would fail or not be propped up as heavily as it has been over the last few years and the decades, well, since it's been founded. And so even though core members right now are active, we still should be able to provide this space and information for those that may potentially feel like they could join the ZAMI NOBLA, whether that is through advocacy groups, committees, whether it's through board service, whether it's through volunteerism, right? Like showing that you don't have to wait till you hit 50 years old to be engaged in these communities and these organizations. Like I found out about ZAMI NOBLA at 38 years old and partnered up with Mary Ann Adams at 38 years old, right? So taking and understanding that if I'm in this position and I'm being asked to be supportive and advocate for our population, understanding that I'm looking at it long term. And however that comes across, right? Like whether it is board service in my 30s and 40s to moving into more volunteer roles or moving into other positions, it's just showing the continuity of the same mission is being valued and highlighted throughout the generations. I value it. And I think if you have value in it, then you'll do a lot more work. And then being in the role of leadership, and I'm used to being in the background. I'm used to like being the support person and doing the research and providing that information. But I also understand that there's that important piece too of also showing up and being present. And so I'm taking that and I'm stepping outside of my own comfort zone, but it's exciting. Because again, I'm surrounded by so much knowledge and so much support and wealth of information that it's just good community, and having community makes you feel like you have worth and value.
Well, and let us also be clear that, as they would say, you bring a whole lot to the table. You have expertise in research around aging. You've been committed to helping the cause for older Black lesbians for some time. As they would say, you're not new at this. And you are doing some really incredible, groundbreaking research and have been a part of that with ZAMI NOBLA. So as you talk, I can't help but to have to interject. You really have the goods to do this, and it's going to be a blessing to the organization. And also, as I was sharing with you before we came online, is that when I was doing my graduate work in rehab counseling, it was interesting for me to understand that middle age was considered 35 to 65. I didn't know that before. It changed things for me, and my understanding about aging changed as well, because at the time I was in my late 30s and early 40s and had no real appreciation for how we think about aging and how we can reshift the narrative around aging. I came to later understand even that Black women age differently than other women, that the whole idea of racialized aging. What do we mean when we talk about racialized aging?
Yeah, I found this out, I want to say last year during a research group, that Black bodies, the weatherization of Black bodies, right, due to racism, discrimination, anti-Black racism, which I really heavily highlight for people, that racism and anti-Black racism are two different things, right? Racism, and it sounds crazy saying your everyday, regular racism, right? Of like, I know the systems I'm experiencing. Anti-Black racism is very insidious and very nefarious in nature, where all of our systems are rooted in the destruction and denial of Black existence. So how do we even navigate spaces if we can't even acknowledge that everything that we have built our structures on is rooted in anti-Black racism? That includes the medical neglect that we experience. That includes the lack of research on our bodies. That includes how we don't want to acknowledge, which is one of my research projects, is on the cost of resilience, the denial of Black existence. And looking at when you apply the term resilience to Black communities, is it really saying that we're resilient, or is it removing accountability from systems and structures that are based in racism and anti-Black racism? Like, resilience in its term generally is about, adapting to trials and traumas and tribulations and making your way through adversity. However, if our systems are put in place to where we have no choice but to survive, is that really being resilient? Is it really being resilient? No, it's navigating spaces that we don't exist. So when we're talking about racialized aging, we adultify young children in the Black community. At 6 years old, I realized I was a different person than what people thought that they saw me, right? My grandmother is white from England. My grandfather's Black from Mississippi. My mother's Black and white, but looks Hispanic, right? Because of her skin tone. I get picked up from daycare and someone asks, "Are you adopted?" And it's like, never thought of that question, never thought that I was adopted. But you realize as an observant person that people are seeing different things and they do racialize everything. So a few years ago at the conference for American Society on Aging, I did a roundtable on playing the race card, specifically saying like majority of people of color don't bring up the race card. It's always non-persons of color that bring up race. Because you're trying to rationalize why we're bringing up something or why we're challenging something like our existence. We shouldn't have to consistently defend our existence. And we shouldn't have to consistently say, you know, yeah, I might be 40, but my organs are 60, right? The research shows that our internal organs are 20 times older than what we are. And that should tell you something about the systems that we're in. So when we're talking about the racialization of aging, it's understanding and acknowledging that, yes, I may be 40 chronologically, but we also need to take in all the other things that I experience that could be inclusive of aging me even more further, right? Like cardiovascular disease for young Black women is between the ages, I think, of 30, I think it was 30 to 40. It was somewhere, it was a small chunk, right? And it's like, I shouldn't be worried about having a heart attack in these ages just because I'm Black and I'm a woman, right? So I think people need to understand that when Black women specifically are talking about certain things, we're not talking about it just because it's off of a whim. It's because we know the research, we have the lived experience, and we understand that we aren't included in those conversations. Hence why we're always actively speaking out and highlighting that there's those interconnecting, like overlapping problems that make aging a little bit more harder. But I think people have this perception that, you know, doesn't crack, right? Black don't crack. Well, we know it doesn't, right? Because we do really good skincare. We take care of ourselves. And we also, I feel like we don't hold on to a lot of negative energy because we understand, like, historically and generationally, like, our ancestors have gone through a lot. We know how to navigate the spaces. We've learned these behaviors, so we know how to survive. But that doesn't mean that we're not rapidly aging on the inside internally, right? So it's like removing the stereotypes of Black don't crack, so you must not be that old, so you must not be stressing, you must not be struggling. It's like, I appreciate the compliment, but please understand, again, in the same context of using the term resilience, like there are more factors influencing how I'm navigating life versus than just what's being presented.
It almost makes me think, as we're talking, the great title for this episode would be Black Don't Crack, but racialized ageism is
Yes.
really creating interior cracks within our bodies.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that even then makes it, it helps people understand the fact that when we started ZAMI NOBLA, our age was 40. And a lot of people didn't understand that. But I think when you help people understand just how Black women age, and then you put in all of those dimensions of those intersections around sexual orientation, around disability, around class, then it makes it even more important for us to really turn a lens onto aging that really meets a multi-generational approach. Or else there are a lot of
Yes.
sisters we're going to be leaving out of the conversation.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Because I think we have to realize, like, the expectations that are put upon Black women, especially, are vastly different than those that are placed on our non-Black counterparts, our white women counterparts, right? Like, and it's again going back historically, white women are considered to be like the goalpost of what society wants in women. But the reality is, you shouldn't have these competing entities, I guess you could call it, right? Like, because we live two different lives. We experience two different worlds. Yes, we're in the same place, but we experience it completely differently. And for white research to put onto Black people and Black bodies that this is how we should navigate, this is how you should age, this is what it should look like, is bad practice. And it's ignorant. And it just shows you again, like, you're not taking into consideration other people's perspectives of their lived reality. And then you have people that want to cherry pick things, right? Like if I say, what's my lived reality? They say, well, we shouldn't all have to formulate into your lived reality. I'm not asking you to do that. But for some reason, a lot of people think when we bring up Black women or Black lesbians that we're asking you to dismiss everything else in the world and only pay attention to us. But then you get mad when we have our own space because you can't leave us alone. So it's like, I don't know what you want from us other than we're just going to be who we are. We're going to be in our space. We're going to represent each other and we're going to advocate for each other. And we would love for you to support us. We would love for you to help us, but we don't want you to co-op what we've already built to shift it to where it fits into your comfort zone, which means kicking out Black lesbians and bringing in all non-Black people.
I think what I hear from you is the power of leadership and accountability and being
Mm-hmm.
responsible to do our own work in the world, which is why it's
Mm-hmm.
important for organizations like ZAMI NOBLA to exist and for us to do the work that we're doing, which is rather unique in terms of what you see in this country. Our commitment to research, for one, community-based research has just been incredible. And you've been a part of that as well. I would love for you to talk about just the current work you're doing, your research that you're doing, and the importance of organizations like ZAMI NOBLA doing the type of research that we've done and will continue to do.
Yeah, I actually just for my class this semester I'm doing my doctorate of social work courses. This is my second to last semester. So this semester I did nonprofit management and development. And so I did my organizational analysis on ZAMI NOBLA, looking at the overview of the organization, the board governance, financial stability, succession planning. And it highlighted a lot for me to really emphasize that what I've been saying over the years and needing, ZAMI NOBLA has been doing, which is showing you what does community-defined healing practices look like? What does collective care look like? It doesn't have to fit into this model that some white male decided to create and said, this is what we all should fit in this box, even though it doesn't make sense to fit into that box. So I think what my research now is like, I've tailored that paper to be submission ready for a journal on nonprofits specifically, because I want to highlight what it actually means to take what you're saying and doing it in practice, right? Taking your membership base, hearing what they're asking for, having conversations, and then how do we implement that into programs? ZAMI NOBLA has tons of programs that they're tailored to their members because they listen to their members, right? They have spaces for them to communicate and have conversation, highlighting the need for caregiver support services for Black aging women and highlighting this need to have more cultural understanding and cultural context when it comes to LGBTQ individuals as caregivers, whether it's with chosen family, whether it's with fictive kinship, whether it's with biological family or neighbors and friends, like identifying and understanding that the research needs to be done because that is a large population of people that help sustain society. So if you're asking for us to be investing in society and capitalism, then you should also acknowledge our existence and hear what we have to say. So for the organizational piece, I'm pretty sure there's other organizations out there that are doing the work, but maybe they're just, actually, no, I don't think, if I'm being very honest. If I'm being very honest, ZAMI NOBLA is the only one, right? Like ZAMI NOBLA is the only one that is highlighting aging Black lesbians, and in so many different levels, right? We're looking at housing, we're looking at advocacy work, research, we're looking at breast cancer support groups, we're looking at caregiver support, mental health and nutrition, right? They're looking at the whole person and actually what that means versus what we read in papers when we say we're going to do person-centered care or holistic care. It's like, yeah, on paper that sounds great, but do you actually know how to do that in practice? And if you don't, by the way, here's ZAMI NOBLA. Let me show you what they're doing and what we're doing as a group and collective, as a large community that spans across different states nationally and internationally, of how many people that this is actually resonating with, right? Mm-hmm. So I think on that organizational piece of the research is, this semester, I thought I really want to highlight what I see in ZAMI NOBLA and what I value as a Black woman who is an aging lesbian, what I appreciate from ZAMI NOBLA and what we're doing. So that's kind of like where this current research is I just submitted an article for that on ZAMI NOBLA and like, what is ZAMI NOBLA doing that you could be doing too? And then by the way, if you don't want to do it, please donate. Be a sustained member, right? Like help support the mission. If you don't want to actively do it, you can be an ally in other ways, and allies can absolutely help in monetary ways. Like we will absolutely happily accept donations because that's how you sustain communities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How do we get women? And I'm thinking about conversations I've had with women who've been in the 40s and the 50s who are really hesitant about thinking about aging, or they'll say, I'm glad that ZAMI NOBLA is in the world because they're doing work to help the old women. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're 40 and you're 50. What do you mean help the old woman? Because there's not a real appreciation. or an
Yeah.
understanding about what aging really is. How can we help
Yeah.
people understand that you're 40, you're 50, you're aging? And to
Yes.
have a very limited sense of that doesn't help you out.
No. I, because I've worked with older adults and always been around them, I've always looked forward to aging. Um, because we are aging every second of every day, right? Like we can't stop it. And what's
Yes.
keeping us alive longer is medicine, right? Medicine's
Hmm.
keeping us living longer. So my question always asks people is like, is it a good quality of life while you're aging? Like, are you just wanting to hit a certain number and think when you hit that number, then you're aging and you're older? Because reality is like, you know, 40 and 50 years old, apparently you're supposed to know exactly what you're doing with your life, right? Like you're supposed to have everything figured out. But if you can acknowledge that we're aging and we're still learning and we're growing, then it gives you more opportunity to lean into that and lean into having those intergenerational, multi-generational conversations with people without feeling like you're the young one or they're too old to understand these things. It's like remove that number and understand the wisdom and value that the person, the human being brings to you. But also acknowledging that like aging is something that's happening. We can't change it. Why would you want to change it? Um, like aging is beautiful in my eyes because I work in the field of aging, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
being older is great. Um, Great in the sense of I feel like people put more stock in what you have to say as you get older because you've lived that life, right? So that's kind of how my approach has been is like you can't run away from what we already know is real. It's just like people that are death aversive, we don't want to talk about death and dying, but it's inevitable. We know it's going to happen. It's the one guarantee we have, right? So accept it and acknowledge it and then learn how experience or ask yourself, how can I learn from this? What can I take from this experience and these moments of, yesterday, last month, February, I turned 41 and everybody said, oh, how you do? How you feel? I don't feel any different. I'm happy I turned 41. I don't feel any different. I still feel like I'm a 25-year-old person in my head. But I understand that how I'm showing up in the world is an older person who has experience and wisdom and knowledge. And if I want people to hear what I have to say, I also have to accept that, yes, I am aging and I am moving up in those brackets.
Well, I think for me, when I turned 50, the light bulb went on and I understood so much more about the world and my body because
Mm,
things were shifting and I it was
yeah.
clear I wasn't 25,
Sure.
which is fine because I'm just so amazed at how the body changes
Yeah.
over the years. And then the question becomes then how do we keep up with that? How do we make sure
Yeah.
that we are investing in a type of life and activity and food and nutrition and community
Yeah.
that makes it possible for us to be these dynamic older Black lesbians who shine, who actually
Yeah.
shine. And that means we have to take care of ourselves and we have to be in community and we have to support the work that organizations like ZAMI NOBLA does in the world because no one else is going to do the work for us but us.
No, exactly. Yeah. I think people needing to understand that being vulnerable isn't a sign of weakness and asking to have support from community isn't weakness or a failure, but then understanding and asking yourself, what does support look like to you so that you can communicate that to people? Um, I've learned from older people, like expectation setting and being able to communicate what that looks like has helped me a lot. I learned that in my 20s from people in their 70s, and it stayed with me now where it's like, if I'm inviting people into my space, I need them to understand fully that expectations, whether they're spoken or not, can cause anxiety, right? And then you're the fear of judgment. And if I'm asking you something and I'm being vulnerable, are you going to judge me and dismiss me? Are you going to repeat patterns that I've experienced growing up, right? Like, are you going to treat me like a child because I'm asking these questions, or are you going to treat me as another person? So I think having those conversations and being able to understand what that even means to you can help you as you're getting older and as you're aging, because then you know how to communicate and ask for what support looks like and ask for community and being vulnerable to say, there's these changes. I'm not sure what they are because nobody ever talks to me about perimenopause or menopause
Hmm.
in general. So who
Hmm.
do I go to? Well, I go to my older friends and I say, is this normal? is this supposed to happen? And they say, oh yeah, nobody told you? Nope, nobody said anything. But if I didn't feel comfortable or vulnerable enough to ask those questions, I'd be suffering in silence and just thinking that this is just a me issue. Like it's solely mine. No one else understands what's going on. And then we tend to lead into that social isolation and then depression, right? Your community is only as good as you're going to be. So you have to be engaged in your community. You have to show up, whether that's just holding space for people and being present, or whether it's actively being engaged in like advocacy work, research, fundraising, however it looks to you, but knowing that it's fulfilling, but it's not conditional. And that's the other piece I love about ZAMI NOBLA. It's not transactional and it's not conditional, right? ZAMI NOBLA doesn't have these attachments to it like many other organizations that are kind of built on capitalistic fundamentals, foundations, I guess you could say, where it's like you give some and you get some, but it's ZAMI NOBLA is very much for the member base, very much focused on aging black lesbians and aging,
Yes.
very focused on what can we do for our community to support us and so that we are happy, healthy, and thriving, not just surviving. Whereas a lot of other organizations that I've come across, it's very performative, where they say they want to do these things until you actively start putting things in place. Then it's like, pause, rewind. You're going too fast, too soon, too much. Can we reel this back? And it's like, I'm 41. Let's add my age. Let's talk about my grandmother who's 96. Let's talk about everybody else before me who said, we tried. We've given you some, we've taken some back, we've narrowed it down, we've minimized it, we've reduced the intensities of the traumas that you've put our families through. But it gets to a point where they keep asking, what do you want? What do you want? And it's like, we want you to leave us alone. But you won't leave us alone because you're so intrigued on what we're doing. But then you don't want to hear anything we have to say, right? So that's where I'm finding myself in this space of like DEI. A lot of Black people came out and said, okay, you guys are ready. Let's do it. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be open. I'm going to share my lived experience and why DEI is important. And yes, it's not just about race, but let's be honest. It really was highlighting that Black people exist, but nobody wanted to really acknowledge that. And so when they put a stop on all the DEI, it really highlighted that, oh, this is a lot of performative actions. You don't actually want to do the work. So where am I going to put my energy? I'm going to put my energy in spaces that are doing the work regardless of what society is saying. And
Yes.
ZAMI NOBLA does that.
Yes.
ZAMI NOBLA wasn't waiting to be directed to do something for a program. ZAMI NOBLA took the lead and did it themselves, right? They're not asking for permission, and we don't have to ask for permission because no one, as you said earlier, no one's going to show up for us but ourselves.
And what's exciting to me, Jennifer, is the way in which we take that thrust with a multi-generational approach, because you just hit the nail on the head when you talked about being in conversation with older women and how that information makes a difference. Oftentimes what I've discovered is that we make the assumption that just because someone's 70 or 80, they're this fountain of wisdom. And because someone is 30 or 40, they are an empty cup. And oftentimes I've seen the reverse. You can have a 30 or 40 who is just overflowing with wisdom, and someone who's 70 or 80 still trying to find her way and trying to discover what it is she's meant to do in this world. So when we have those assumptions and we bring them to community and conversation, and then we get a chance to kind of massage them and realize that really it is an interdependent relationship that we all share and need to share in order to make the difference that we need to see in the world, particularly around issues of aging and Black lesbians. Then it becomes a beautiful thing because we know the work that can be done by all of us across this wide span of ages, but we have to be in community together. So that leads me to ask you, as a 41-year-old, aging Black lesbian, because we're all aging if we're breathing the air on this planet.
Yes.
What brings you joy, particularly as we've talked about just the stress and the energy it takes for you to be in the academy, do the research you're doing, to do the work of advocacy. What brings you joy as a Black lesbian who's doing work in aging?
I think what brings me joy is knowing that, and it's a reminder I have to tell myself constantly, right? There's billions of people in the world. It's not just me doing the work. It's not just me realizing that there's an issue and reminding myself that I'm just one voice that's advocating for many, but the advocacy that I'm doing, I know I'm getting the direct wording from the people that I'm representing. So I feel more joyful in that, knowing that when I am speaking and advocating and being passionate about Black lesbians that are aging, that I'm fully supported and backed by ZAMI NOBLA and the members, right? And then the pockets of joy that I always ask people of, like, how do you get through life? How do you get through the next 10 years? And I'm always told, you look for the slivers of hope. You look for the positive. So really doing that and understanding that this is my journey. I don't know how this journey is going to proceed, but I'm going to enjoy the journey when I can enjoy it. But I'm also going to ride the emotions of if I'm feeling down or depressed or angry or upset or like stifled with society, that's also part of the human experience. So I think for me, what's bringing me joy is knowing that ZAMI NOBLA is new information for many people too. And them to see me so passionate about what ZAMI NOBLA is doing in the field of aging, I think strengthens them feeling more confident in what I'm presenting and saying. I think, I just being, the joy that I get is knowing that ZAMI NOBLA is just doing awesome work. And I benefit a lot from what ZAMI NOBLA does, right? Like, I benefit a lot from the groups that we go into. And I think the first time I went to Sister Harriet my comment was, I'm just happy to be in the spaces with everybody, right? Like, cause that truly was filling my cup of just being in company where you don't have to explain yourself or explain your life, your existence. Like, I don't think people realize and understand the importance of knowing what it is to have representation and being in spaces where we don't have to keep masking or putting on these different performances of who we are just because we want to accommodate someone's comfort. Whereas, like, it's the unspoken bond and language among Black people of, you don't have to tell me anything. I get it. I already know your life because I walk in those shoes too. But then to be Black lesbians, it's layered. We already know more. So it's like, I don't have to give you a background to why I, made the decision I made, because I can just give you the scenario and you can say, oh, totally understand. You don't even have to explain yourself. Like, I get that. And I understand that. Right. So I think those parts bring me joy of knowing that. And I think I've told Marianne this before of like, I don't think had I known about ZAMI NOBLA, I don't think I would be in the position that I'm in now, just in general, in the field of aging. I think I might have just become complacent and just sat with whatever is thrown at me and then been miserable thinking, this is just life. This is how things are. I'm going to have to figure it out on my own. But then when I realized and found out about ZAMI NOBLA, it's like, I don't have to do this alone. And seeing the success of the members and success of ZAMI NOBLA and just the connections that Marianne and everybody has made themselves within the organization and with other organizations. And then realizing that people really want to tap into ZAMI NOBLA, but they don't like when they're challenged because we're asking, is this conditional? Is it transactional? How does this benefit ZAMI NOBLA? And then when you realize it's just a nice, what do they call it? A notch in the belt for other organizations to show, look, we're working with Black people. And it's like, we don't want extractive research anymore. Either you benefit us and, show up in the community and be present in the community and actively involve yourself in the community to grow that relationship and rapport, and then present the research that you would like to do. Don't just come into us as if we're just a Walmart in an aisle and you just say, I want to talk to you, and I'll pick you, and then we'll just go from there. You just tell me your whole life story, and then we're going to sell it. Then we're going to create this whole model, and then we're going to promote it, and we're not going to say anything about Black people that were involved in it. Like, historically, we've already experienced that. We've seen that. Like, I guess the disconnect I'm not understanding with some communities is, why are you so upset that Black people are taking it upon themselves to take care of themselves when that's historically what we've done? You've just never seen it because of the way history has been written and the way that society has shown us. So now you're upset thinking that we're kind of like siloing and isolating other people, but that's not what we're doing. It's collective care. That is what collective care looks like. That is what community defined healing practices are in practice, not just what we read in papers and articles and like the theories. This is what it looks like applied. And it can be frustrating to me because I come from a mixed race family. And I always joke with people and say, like half my family, they are white, blonde hair, blue-eyed colonizer English people. And I said they may have been poor, but they were still from the colonizers, right? So I have that piece. Then I have my dad's side where, we have slaves, we have descendants of slaves, we have sharecroppers and lots of advocates. So I find myself in this space of like ping pong back and forth of like, be careful how you say this, be careful how you say that. But then I realized I shouldn't I shouldn't have to preface that when I'm having conversations with people, it's not a personal attack on individuals, right? It's more of an attack on the systems and the structures that are in place and how they've not succeeded to help support or sustain Black existence. And when Black people take it upon ourselves, specifically Black women, take it upon ourselves to advance our own form of community, it seems to be a problem for other people.
You know, historically, there was a time in this world, in this country, where Black people were not supposed to look another white person in the eye. And I think that what you said just then reminds me of the power of standing, as people would say, flat-footed in the world and looking people in the eye and talking about your truth, who you are, how you move in the world, and the importance of that and taking care of yourself within all of that. Because that's not
Yes.
something we've been told or taught we can do or should do.
Yeah. And I keep saying, like, I don't believe that we were created to sit here and work and fill the pockets of capitalists and live in this life of oppression. It's like, it's an experience and we should be able to experience what it is to be human. But I don't feel that we will get there until the world wants to talk about the anti-Black racism. And they're not ready to have those conversations because people take it as personal attacks. And it's like, but it's not you, because you personally don't have power either, right? Like, you didn't go and change this. You didn't make these rules, but you absolutely are benefiting from it. So you are, you're guilty in that sense that you don't want to change it, because that means then you would have to either really acknowledge and sit with the privileges that you have been given over your years, and then really have to accept the truth that the system and the society is deeply racist and anti-Black racist and homophobic and transphobic and all the things, ageist and ableist, right? Like, you'd have to actually sit down and have the conversation with yourself and realize that you benefited from all of these oppressive systems. And I don't think we're in a space for people to even acknowledge that.
This is a sidebar conversation, but what is curious to me as I think about how you've talked about your grandmother being 96 and a white woman, as you think about her life and aging and the work you're doing, particularly with older Black lesbians, how do you see her and her experiences and then look at the work you're doing and thinking and looking at older Black lesbians who are in their 80s and 90s, kind of around her age? I'm just curious.
Well, I have to clarify because my paternal grandmother is 96 and she's Black from
Okay.
Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
Okay, well,
My
thank you.
my mom's mom, my maternal grandmother, she was English. She passed in 2004. But knowing her historical past and her history and her traumas and her growing up in England and what she experienced, I don't know how she would feel about this if she were presently alive. Just because I don't think she would have been in a space to have the conversation like that. Like, I think for her, being gay or lesbian is a phase. And in her mind, you get married, you have children, and you have a family, right? And your loved one, your husband, will buy you your jewelry that you want. Whereas my dad's mom, who's 96, my grandma in Oklahoma, she was raised by her grandmother, who was a former slave and then a sharecropper. So her experience, when I talk about Black women aging, I do think about her heavily of, like, she grew up in poverty. She grew up in Okmulgee. They took a wagon, she said, a covered wagon on horseback from, Freestone County, Texas to Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and sharecropped. And she says she used to run around and pick pecans from the floor, the ground, and she picked cotton once. And I said, "Why'd you pick cotton?" She said, "I want to see what it was like." And I said, "I don't, but okay." So I do talk, when I talk to her, I ask her, I say, "How are you feeling, like, with the way the world is going? And, like, has it changed in the 96 years that you've been alive?" And it is disheartening to see that at 96 years old, like, the world hasn't really changed for how they view Black women. and how they box you in as an angry Black woman, or, you are problematic. So I do have those conversations with her specifically, like, what does it mean to age? What does it look like? And for her, currently, she's tired, is what she says. I'm tired. And I say, well, I hear that. But her saying is, I say, how you doing today, Grandma? She said, well, the good Lord woke me up, so I guess I still got things to do. And so I laugh about that. And I've noticed that I start telling myself that in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, well, the good Lord woke me up, so I guess I still have things to do. So I take a lot of her pieces of wisdom and I ask her and I say, well, what is that? Like, what do you think? She said, well, I guess I still have things to learn. I guess I still have things to understand, right? Like there's still lessons that she has to learn, no matter how much she's ready to go. And she talks about death and dying. We talk about it all the time. Nobody else in the family will talk with her about it. But, the conversation of she wants us to pop a bottle of champagne and celebrate that she's reconnecting with her ancestors and her loved ones and her mom and my grandfather, right? And it's like, I can't be mad that I asked a 96-year-old how they feel about dying and then they gave an honest answer, right? Like I have to accept that. Definitely a different reaction than it was when I was in my 20s in 2005 when my grandfather was dying, my mom's dad. And I asked him, and I felt horrible because I knew a lot about my mom's mom and her childhood growing up in England. And I don't know why I just had this assumption that my grandfather would be around forever. So I never really sat down to have those conversations. And a week before he passed, I sat down and I said, I feel horrible. I didn't ask you about your childhood. And he said, well, what do you want to know? And it's like, well, I don't even know what to ask because I want to know everything about your life, right? I want to know everything. And then I asked him, how do you feel? Like, are you okay with dying? And he said, I was married to your grandma for 45 years and I miss her and I'm ready. At that time, I was not okay with that answer, very much not understanding, like, you're only in your 70s, like, you still have much more to go. Like, what are you talking about? We don't even know everything about you. And then now in my 40s and hearing my 96-year-old grandmother telling me, it's like, yeah, that's growth and wisdom in aging, right? Coming to a place of acceptance of, we may not be here in the physical form, but I am a strong believer that, like, we'll see each other in a different lifetime, a different timeline, and whatever that looks like. But then I'm also on the side of the rational side of like, well, we really don't know what happens when you die because we don't know. So why would I stress about something I don't know other than what does aging gracefully look like for me? What does a good death look like for me? And what does community look like for me? And today, community is ZAMI NOBLA. And today, aging gracefully is being in this field of aging, in this space, being a voice because I'm going to be in that space, right? Some organizations consider 55 and older seniors. Some say 60 and over. Some say 65. I found out today from you that middle age is 35 to 65. Like, nobody told me that, right? So there's a lot of disconnect in even the field of aging. What does aging mean? And I think it is a unique journey for individual people, but I think it really does come back down to, what does aging gracefully for you look like? For me, it's like, I would like to live alone as long as I can. But in reality, I understand that that's not truly realistic. As you get older, you have more needs. But coming to a space of, when that time comes, am I going to be aware enough to know when I need to ask for that support and help? Am I going to let my pride and my ego step in the way and make me think that I can do this on my own? Or if I admit that I need help, does that mean I'm too old now? Like, no, none of that means any of that. What it means is that your body physically needs a little bit more support. But that doesn't mean like you're old and decrepit and can't do anything. Right? So I think people put a lot on the presentation in the media, what old looks like. All right. Like, when you think of an older person, you think they have a walker or a wheelchair or a cane and they're kind of hunched over and they're not able to function. But I'm 41 and I have arthritis in my neck and my back. So It doesn't really matter. It's just, what does it look like to age gracefully? But understanding that key piece as well is like the weatherization of Black bodies is real.
Yes, yes, yes. That is such a great point. Such a great point. Just a couple more questions. The first one is, what do you want your legacy to be as a Black lesbian doing work in aging? What is your ultimate legacy for the work you do once you're no longer here?
I have thought about this, and I always keep coming back to my nieces and my goddaughter of like, for me, when I'm dead, I'm dead. Like anything afterwards is not going to impact me. It's going to impact those that are who know me or are associated with me. And so I would just like my legacy to be that, like, no matter what, people knew that I have integrity and I have values, and I stuck with that and was honest about the challenges with being and having that integrity of being very focused on what justice looks like. And I just want them to be proud of the work that I put out in the world. I don't think I would ever want them to feel like embarrassed if that was their aunt or their godmom, like I think that, because I think about that, because into genealogy and ancestry, and I'm reading about family members, and it's like, I'm proud of the work that they did. And I don't think they ever thought that that's what they were expecting with the work that they do. But because I work in the field of aging, and I know a lot of people think about legacy and what that looks like. And a lot of people are like, well, I want success and I want to have this and I want that. I really just want the people who know me to be proud to be associated with me.
Well, I know we're proud. We're very, very
That
proud.
makes my heart happy.
We're very, very proud and honored to have you as a leader and a member of ZAMI NOBLA. The final question I ask our guest is there something I left out? Is there a question you wish I had asked? Is there a bit of information you want to leave with our listeners today?
Yeah, because I found this out when I was 19, and I think it's very important for people to know their history. And so I found out on my dad's side that my great-grandmother, Mary Beulah Horn, was the first Black policewoman with the Tulsa Police Department, and she is in the Greenwood Rising Museum. Her son, my grandfather, Kermit Horn, was the first Black lieutenant with the Tulsa Police Department. And then my great-uncle Clifford Horn was one of the first 6 Black firefighters with the Tulsa Department. We're also descendants of the Greenwood, Black Wall Street. We had property that now the highway runs through. So I like to give people a little bit of that so that they know that when I say it's generational, it's in my bloodline. Like, it's in my bloodline. Hardcore, that advocacy work for justice, advocacy for marginalized communities, advocacy for self-determination and what that looks like for Black people and Black bodies and our agency and autonomy. I love to bring back history and tell people, you can't expect me to trust what you're saying when history of my 41 years has shown me something different. And in my 41 years of being a Black woman, it has shown me that I can't really trust what society is telling me. I have to lean in on my community, and I would give my life for my community versus society. I laugh also because I joined the military, and a lot of people are like, oh, and I said, I did not join for God and country. I joined for school. Right? Like, there are reasons why people join the military. I was 24. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was burnt out working in care facilities, and I lived in Oklahoma with my older sister helping with her kids in Lawton, and that was the worst place ever. And so I joined the Navy and thought, let me just go somewhere, do something with my life, right? And then a wrench got thrown in and had to change trajectories. Whatever plans I think I have in place, I need to be flexible and open and understanding that they may not go the way I want. But is it going to be a detriment to me if it doesn't, right? So I lean on my history of my grandmother on both sides, their upbringing, the experiences they went through, and just knowing that it's not a one-off that Jennifer is the way that Jennifer is. Like, it is absolutely in my DNA to be who I am and to speak how I speak and to advocate for who I advocate. I just think it needed to take its time to get to the point that I am now. And I'm excited to see what the next 10, 15, 20 years look like where I'm at.
Well, girl, you've got some good bones, and we are glad about it. Jennifer Horn, thank you for being part of our Black lesbian herstory.
Thank you, Angela.
I so appreciate Jennifer's conversation with us today and the importance that it places on multi-generational leadership and how when we think about aging, particularly when we think about Black women, we need to be very expansive in our understanding about how the lives we lead and live affect our bodies. If you're interested in more of the research that Jennifer has been a part of, or the programs and advocacy and opportunities that we focus on in ZAMI NOBLA, please visit us online at our website, www.zaminobla.org, to find out more about us. Also, if you've not had a chance to listen to other podcast episodes, I would encourage you to turn your ear to the past and check out some of our other exquisite guests. You will be thrilled beyond measure. As always, my friend, I so appreciate you listening to the podcast and invite you to leave feedback, ratings, comments, wherever you get these delicious episodes, and to let us know that it makes a difference to you. Thank you. And as always, have a sweet one.